Welcome back, grade 12 scholars. We are now in lesson 42 of week 9 of your ELA Distance Learning. What can you expect in these videos? You already know. First, variety. Each one is going to be a little bit different. Next, I'll always provide you with a list of materials and resources. We'll move through an overview of the day's learning. I'll always try to provide you a model of either a close reading activity or a writing sample, and of course, we'll preview the learning for the next day. We are in day 4 of this week. Our video is ELA G12 W9L42. We're looking at the same text. I know that we were close reading the previous 2 days, different parts of the text, but today we're really going to look at the article in its entirety, with a focus on the interaction between the base and the surrounding community in San Diego. Should be interesting. So let's get started. It wouldn't be a lesson without these 3 key reminders. So first, make sure that you're sharing your learning with a family member or friend, someone who maybe has a little bit of an interest in military life. Next, complete the weekly fluency activity using a page from the text. And lastly, do at least 20 minutes of independent reading and log your activity. Now we can start in on the actual lesson. And here's our pictogram puzzle. So remember, you're looking at this image, these letters arranged in this way, thinking about the words and phrases that it might bring up. Pause the video here for 15 seconds or so if you need to, because I'm about to reveal the answer in the next slide. And the answer is circle of friends. Yes, we are a circle of friends connected through these YouTube videos, connected through our learning. I hope. Okay, let's get officially into today's lesson. The materials that you'll need for today's lesson. Well, lesson 42 is on page 133, note catcher page 134, text pages 124 to 126, and of course you should have a pencil or pen, something to write with. I'm going to say the word highlighter because I always do. So gather these materials together before we start in on today's learning. I was thinking before how much I really like how we're exploring the idea of community and home at the same time. So think about it this way. When I raise the essential question, what does it mean to call a place home? What do we often associate with home? Community, the sense of belonging. Keep that essential question in mind. And also keep the guiding questions in mind as you reread the text. What makes a place important enough to write about? And in what ways is home both a place and a state of mind? The learning target for today reads, I can annotate a text and analyze key details. You know, it doesn't sound too exciting, but I promise you the final product will reaffirm your understanding of complex text like this. And now for an overview of today's lesson. First, you're going to reread the article and mark details the author uses to describe the interaction between Camp Pendleton and the surrounding community of San Diego. Next, you're going to think about the following question. Why might only 1/3 of married Marines live on the base? It's an interesting statistic. You'll discuss following that the following question. How does the author explain the idea that civilians may not understand the lives of military families? And last, you're going to be writing a written response inside of your note catcher. You'll look at how the author thinks about the idea of home, and you'll also explore the separation between Camp Pendleton and the outside community. So how does he equate that with home, and how might it affect military personnel and their families' conception of home? There's a lot to deal with in that question. Make sure you read it thoroughly. And of course, close today's learning with reading, your fluency practice, and a deeper discussion about the text. Now for your reading. So reread the article and mark the details the author uses to describe the interaction between Camp Pendleton and the surrounding community of San Diego. Pause the video and take some time to do this now. I'd like to review my close reading efforts with you, if that's okay. Hope it is. I'm going to do it anyways. All right, so let's take a look at page 126, right underneath the heading of Evolution of Base Living. Remember, what I'm doing is I'm trying to find details from the text that highlight the way in which folks living at Camp Pendleton interact with the surrounding community of San Diego. So So let's start. The deployment of Marines to the first Gulf War in 1991 in Iraq and Kuwait from Camp Pendleton caused a sharp downturn in Oceanside's economy, and the local businesses suffered. A decade or so later, when Marines left for Afghanistan in 2001 and Iraq in 2003, the economic impact was barely noticeable. Their families had already been doing most of their shopping on base. Officials here argue that life inside the base is not as separate as it appears. All unmarried Marines under the rank of sergeant live on base, but only 1/3 of married Marines do. Moreover, the average Marine returns to civilian life after 4 years on active duty. This is really interesting. Look at these lines that I underlined in blue. I see here that military personnel and their families used to frequent local businesses in San Diego for their shopping, right? So they didn't have that much to do on base. There wasn't a lot available, so they had to go elsewhere. However, now they do most of their shopping at Camp Pendleton. So there isn't so much a need to interact with the outside community in San Diego, maybe once in a while, but when you have everything at your fingertips, why travel elsewhere? Interesting. Did you pick out the same one? Take some time now to review your annotations. Now let's think a little bit. Here's a question for us. Why might only 1/3 of the married Marines live on the base? With all the features at Camp Pendleton, the bowling alleys, the grocery stores, the stores in general, why do you think 2/3 of these married Marines decided to move off base? Keep in mind that keyword married. All right, take a look at the bottom of page 26. There might be some blank space and write your response there. Pause the video to do so now. And now preparing for your discussion. So before you enter into this conversation, put some thought into this question. How does the author explain the idea that civilians may not understand the lives of military families? To answer this question, think back to some of the evidence you underlined yesterday, the statistics, the quotes, the anecdotes, and try to come up with a response that is evidence-based. Now, if you're like me, his brother was in the military. Although we didn't live as a military family on a base, I have an idea of some of the sacrifice that was involved. So it's interesting to kind of put that text-based response next to maybe your personal response and have a deeper discussion. Pause the video to do this now. And now for the writing component of today's lesson. So on your note catcher, I'd like you to answer this question in 5 to 7 sentences, using evidence from the text, of course. Here's the prompt. We often think of home as being a self-contained place, but this article explores how the home of Camp Pendleton interacts with the community around it, San Diego. How does Camp Pendleton's separation increase the feeling of home for military families? And how does this separation decrease the feeling of home? Think back to what you learned about the interaction between Camp Pendleton and the rest of San Diego during your close reading, especially in the present day. How important is this interaction? Think about this, write your response, and make sure to use evidence from the text. Pause the video to complete this step now. If you have any questions about the lesson or your work, make sure to reach out to your teacher at their first name, their last name, at DetroitK12.org. Now for a preview of tomorrow's learning. So lesson 43's learning target is, I can use my understanding of a text to respond to the unit's essential question. I love these lessons because it brings our learning full circle, and it also allows us to reflect on the different texts that we've read throughout the unit. So stay tuned for tomorrow's lesson. Thank you so much for engaging and learning with me today. Here's a few quick reminders before you take off. So first, don't forget to talk about this lesson with someone at home, especially someone who's interested in military life. Next, read for 20 minutes and complete an entry in your reading log. Remember, you should always be asking questions of the text that you're reading independently as well. And lastly, practice your reading fluency. If you need a quick review of how to do this, make sure you turn to the first couple of pages in your grade 12 packet. We'll see you tomorrow for lesson 43.